Welcome, everybody. I am here today with my friend Andy Conway from Expedition Oliver. How you doing today?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm glad to talk about this project and the EP, The Silent Planet, that you put out last year. And I think you've got some stuff upcoming. You were telling me you've got some shows planned, really getting this project into gear. So I figured we would just explain what the project is first, and kind of whet people's appetite so they can go check
Okay.
it out.
Cool.
So I guess I was listening to it again and loving it. It's very cool, and the sound is very familiar to me, but I also can't quite place it. So in your words, like, what would you call the style and the sound that you have, at least on this first EP?
Well, thank you. People ask me all the time, and I typically just say it's alt rock with piano. But a friend of mine, when he listened to it, the way he described it was, he called it piano forward rock, and I was like, that's a really good descriptor, because it's not, a lot of it is piano led. It kind of reminiscent of like the early aughts, late '90s with like Coldplay and Radiohead, and so I'd probably say that piano forward rock is how I describe it, but it's in that alternative post-punk genre.
Okay, yeah, because I was thinking the thoughts that came to my head too were post punk, post rock. Honestly, a lot of stuff that a lot of our friends did during college and stuff too. So like, there's definitely that era. I can hear the influence, but at the same time, I was like, there's some like 70s vibes here too. Like,
Okay.
there were certain tracks, because it's called Silent Planet, which it's very space themed and both philosophical and spiritual, I would say, if that's fair to say.
That's accurate, yeah.
And there were parts where I was like, this is what the score to Interstellar would sound like if it came out in the 70s.
Thank you.
Yeah, which, I mean, I love that movie and that score, and this would just make it a different vibe, but it still has that sense of expansiveness and wonder. So what were the actual, like, kind of the feelings and the moods you were going for? Like, what does this project mean, so to speak?
Man, that's tough, because I don't know, the way I listen to music and feel music, it's not typically like, it's not like how like when you write a book or whatever, there's like a theme, like the theme here is, cooking, or the theme, whatever. So like, I've never been able to put like themes as words to music. It's always been like a deeper thing. It's more like a feeling, but not quite an emotion either. So I don't know, I guess like the project is tapping into a feeling that resonates with me really well. I'm definitely trying to capture something I kind of heard in my childhood, but was never expanded upon by the artists of the day. And I always felt like there was something that could have been more tapped into, and that's kind of what I'm doing. That's honestly a lot of what it is. That's kind of the antithesis of it, is being like, there was something there when I was young that I really liked, and it was like, it only touched the surface. So I really want to dig deeper. But yeah, in terms of like putting words to it, I don't know. Like, I don't know if I can put words to it, to be honest with you.
No, that actually makes sense to me. And yeah, not that I want you to have to basically narrow it down to one word, and that actually answers my question even better than I worded the question itself, because I completely relate to that idea, and I think a lot of musicians do, of, I mean, basically writing what you want to hear, what you wish you could hear. And that's why, if you're writing what you want, you're going to be passionate about it, and you're going to be able to push it to be like, no, this is like the best version of this thing, because that's why I did it, to do a better version of what I love.
Yeah, that's exactly right. A lot of it, I describe to people, a lot of it is, it's almost like you can see something, but you're not quite sure what it is, and it's almost like you're digging for it and you're trying to discover it. And it's a very, I know not a lot of artists approach music that way, but it's almost like there's something already there, and I just have to figure out what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. The funny thing is, I had a similar feeling, or I often have a similar feeling where it's like a discovery, and you're just kind of noodling or thinking of different ideas until something clicks. And is that how, like, I really like to get into the weeds about the process, if that's okay?
Yeah, sure.
So let's say before you've written anything, do you remember what your starting point was? Because you already mentioned that it's not necessarily about a word or a specific theme or topic. So where do you start? Like, what instrument do you pick up, or do you write a lyric first, or where does it start?
It's almost exclusively, it starts with, I would call it a piano riff, like a
Okay.
guitar riff almost, but like a piano thing, like a piano, whether it's a chord progression or just a rhythmic thing or some kind of arpeggio. Typically, it honestly starts with the piano. It's like, ooh, I hit something there, and then the melody kind of complements it, the lyrics complement it, the drums complement, the bass complements it, and it's kind of building what you started with. Occasionally, yeah, I'll write at the same time. I'll do lyrics and melody with, but that's very rare. It's usually I'm starting with the piano, and yeah, I'm noodling and I'll hit something. I'm like, oh, and then I'll like refine it. I'll be like, okay, this is my starting point. Let me build a song from this, and that's typically, which I just based on like when you listen to rock music or alternative, it feels like that's how a lot of those songs are written to. It starts with a guitar riff and you build it. So it's kind of a similar mentality is in that sort of genre.
Yeah, absolutely. I relate. That's very similar to how I would do it. My band would do it. I mean, there's no right way, like, except for the way that works best for you. So I mean, there's a ton of other ways to write. But in that same vein, if we can get even more in the weeds in terms of like gear and stuff, how did you? What was the process of once you started it rolling? What was the process of recording it like? Because I know you and a lot of us kind of independent and younger artists and bands where we have to be like 100% DIY. So how was that?
Yeah, for this EP, I pretty much did everything. Obviously the writing started first, and when it was written, typically, I don't know if this is true for every song I did, but typically what I do is I'll sort of build a skeleton. And so, yeah, the way I think of music, I think is the way a lot of post-punk people think of music, in this very rigid way of, okay, here's the bass part, here's the drum part, here's the vocal part, here is the piano part. And so I'll basically build a skeleton, and it won't sound great. It's just a demo. It's a crappy MIDI demo, and it'll be the bass part I wrote, the drum part I wrote, the piano part I wrote, and if I'm feeling it, I'll sing a really rough vocal demo. And then from there, I kind of build from there. Yeah, for this project, I bought some sample packs for drums and piano. Um, and then a lot of times the drums I will write on a drum set. I don't have a drum set anymore, but at the time I did. And I would write it on the drum set, but then I wouldn't record it. I'd do it on MIDI. I would translate it. Um, and then I'd pick some drum sample packs. I think pretty much every song on there has two layers of drum samples. I'll do like one sample for maybe like the tightness of it, and then another sample for like getting the crackness of it of the drums, and I'll kind of blend them and compress them. I don't know if your audience is savvy with tech, but so I don't know how deep you want me to get into that, but and then yeah, piano. I think a lot of the piano has the crappy MIDI track somewhere buried in there, and then I'll put, some samples on top of that. Some of them I think I put even an actual live piano that was recorded myself, just to give it some organic feel to it. Um, you know, just being a little out of time and even a little out of tune, it kind of gives it like, okay, this feels more like a real piano. Um, and then bass, I record just straight to from a cab pretty much, and that's yeah. And then vocals I need to work on. I've as an engineer, the engineer part of me, the vocals have always been a challenge to, I guess, wrap my head around. I don't know how to explain it, but like when you're as an engineer, there's like when it comes to anything, there's like an understanding of how something like you get something a field, you know. So when it comes to recording instruments, I kind of get it. I'm like, okay, I'm trying to capture this part of this instrument, and this is how I can do it. With vocals, I know in theory it's the same thing, but for some reason I have a hard time wrapping my head around, you know, do I record a certain location? Oops, like down here, up here, far away? Like I haven't fully wrapped my head around all that stuff. And I know that there are engineers that are vocal engineers and they're really good at that. So that's an area I'm kind of weak in. But I think I just did a single take, not a single take, but a single track. There's no dubbing or anything or doubling. And I just went with that and, you know, tuned it, of course, and put effects on it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I think whatever audience I might have is a lot of them are musicians and stuff. So I know I love hearing stuff like that. So thank you for diving into that, because I relate to all of that. That all makes sense. I think you did an amazing job of making it sound clear and modern, but also very organic. And the vocals too, because I know exactly what you mean about how hard it is to record them, but your voice, and especially I think what makes it work, and this is something that sometimes people will forget about, because you can get really into it with mic placement or mics themselves, preamps, but if the part is good enough, as long as you make it listenable, it will sound good. So like your hooks, and what really impressed me, like what came across was like, I was like, wow, this is a very kind of broad and almost ambient atmospheric sort of vibe on the EP, but you still have like hooks that you want to sing along with. So that, I think that's what makes it connect as well. So do you think things like you mentioned earlier, Coldplay and Radiohead, is that who you look to for that type of songwriting as well? Or are there different genres that influence different parts of your songwriting?
Yeah, thank you again. I appreciate it. So in terms of direct influence for the melodies, I don't think I have a direct influence. Of course, there's probably subconscious influences. Yeah, a lot of, in terms of the feeling and the vibe, comes from early Coldplay and Radiohead, and I'm sure there was probably an element of influence for the vocals. People have told me that that vocally I remind them of Death Cab for Cutie, which I did listen to as well, but I was never intentional about mimicking them or taking influence from them. So in an indirect way, I'm sure there's a lot of influence from like the early aughts, late 90s British. I always call it British alt rock, like Radiohead and
yeah, totally.
And but then you can throw some Death Cab in there. I used to love them as when I was in high school. So yeah, it's hard to say because there's no conscious influence. I think a lot of it is subconscious, but yeah, from what people have told me, it's probably within that same vein.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's cool. And I think it's funny, those early influences, even if you don't consciously add them, I think because they were so integral to your development as a musician in the early stages, they're kind of permanently there. Like, I don't necessarily go to try and write Metallica sounding riffs, but sometimes it sounds that way because that's like how I learned how to play guitar.
Yeah, because there's like an element of you listen to them because you like them.
Yeah.
And so you play what you like. So yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, totally. And speaking of playing, you do have some shows, you said, lined up in the near future. Well, two questions: where? And the second part of that, How's that going to look? What are you doing as far as putting together the live version?
Yeah, I've played a couple shows already. This is kind of a new venture for me. Um, but I'm playing at the Well in Green Hills, the Lipscomb location. Um, I'm actually playing there twice. One in July, end of July. It's I can pull up the exact. I think it's July 29th. It's a Friday. And then again in August, I think it's 26th. It's like the last Friday as well. Those are both at the Well. And uh, my goal is to have a consistent, 3, 4 piece, probably a 4 piece band. And the shows in the past, I've had some people play. So this first show will probably just be me solo playing. But the second show, I think I'll be able to get at least a 3 piece together. But in terms of long term, yeah, I think the goal is to get enough people to play exactly what's recorded. I don't usually like playing songs that are super like that the composition has changed a whole lot. I typically don't like to do that unless it's very intentional and on purpose and there's like a reason for it and it gives it a cool sound. So typically I'm trying to play exactly how it's recorded, but it's a work in progress to get there, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. So when it's just you, are you going to do it like just acoustic? Are you going to do just the piano, or will you have backing tracks?
Probably just be piano and vocals, yeah.
Nice. Well, I know Nashville people love that raw stripped down thing, so it's not a
Cool.
bad place to start. But I totally feel you. I would much rather have the full. We're very and I as a fan, I'm very arrangement. It's funny. I don't know if you're a Beatles fan or you watched the Get Back documentary.
I haven't seen it, but I do. When I've gone and back and listened. I have a deep appreciation for some of their stuff.
Yeah, and I think I think you'll enjoy it, because the reason I bring it up is because I was sort of intrigued by when it shows them writing the songs and the process and how different it was, or not, but also not different. It's like so much. Every single musician or band member can relate to like the conversations they're having, and something that Paul McCartney said during it, he was like, "Oh, we want this to be like basically a jam feeling and not an arranged song." Whereas I think you and I and modern musicians, we are all like bedroom musicians, so to speak, where it's like, okay, you sit and you create the song because we don't really have the opportunity to get a ton of people in a studio and take 3 weeks to work out a song. So thinking back to an arranged song being a whole separate thing back then, as opposed to now, it's and a totally different reference. Misha Mansour from Periphery talked about how a live performance is exactly that, as a performance, but the album is more like a painting where you can make every single brushstroke exactly what you want. And therefore I relate to you wanting to be like, okay, well that's what I made on purpose. That's what I want people to hear at the show. But thankfully the same technology that lets us do these things DIY, you can use that for shows as well.
Yeah. And people have suggested I do tracks, and I can't get myself to do it. It's just it doesn't feel right.
That's fair. Like I know there's a lot of mixed feelings on tracks. Like we definitely have gone back and forth, and like it's one of those, if it's a necessity, it's a nice insurance policy, but it's never the perfect situation. Yeah. And so speaking of the sound and moving forward, are there any sort of references or more modern bands or artists that you could compare yourself to, or who you would love to tour with, just to give people more of an idea of your vibe and everything?
It's a good question. There's no direct, I'd say, influence from modern bands. But I haven't really thought about that in terms of who I'd tour with. There's a band I recently discovered called Slow Pulp that I really like. They're kind of, I don't know what you'd call them. I guess they'd be post-punk, but they're really cool. I like them. Maybe a band like Always. They're cool too. but there's no, I don't know, I can't think of any direct influence because no one. Part of my reason for this project is because I no one was doing it. I was like, someone needs to. Part of it is literally was like, someone needs to make this. Like, I always think of it as a gift to people. I'm like if I can't get it from someone else, I gotta make it for myself and for other people. Um, so I don't know. Yeah, that's a good. I haven't really thought about that, but nothing comes to mind. But yeah, probably in terms of touring, probably some of those, some probably in the post-punk sort of genre, or even, yeah, just maybe ambient rock, something like that.
Yeah, I could see it with someone like May or Copeland or whatever as well, like the piano forward
Okay, yeah,
rock, where it's like you don't sound like them, but there's enough like common like denominators
yeah.
that the audience might dig it too.
It's funny too because a lot of people, when they talk about like, oh, piano for like when I say like, oh, Coldplay, Radiohead, then they'll go like, oh, like the Fray. I'm like, no, not the Fray. Like
That's much more pop. Yeah.
yeah, and it's funny how people can make that connection. I don't make that connection because like they'll be like, oh, because they're the same thing. And I'm like, in my mind, they're not the same thing, but
Yeah, it's really interesting how you'll reference or use a term and it'll mean something totally different to people. Like because I'm a alternative and pop punk and Warped Tour type kid, you say piano forward rock, one of the first things that's going to come to mind is like Mayday Parade. But
yeah,
I don't think
yeah.
that's your vibe.
No, yeah, it's not.
But the funny thing was when I was re-listening to the EP when you were on your way over here while I was setting up, after it went through, Spotify put on the radio based on that, and it was such an amazing variety of stuff that I was like, this all tracks, but it's all also very different. So like one of the first ones that came up sounded very like retro metal, like The Sword or Priestess.
Okay.
And then the next one was a very like indie math rock emo kind of jangly guitar thing. And then there was one that was like, man, honestly the only reference I can think of. Do you remember Staying for the Weekend, who we went to school with?
The name is so familiar, but I can't think of.
I think you dig. I really loved their first EP, and it's just that kind of clean but crunchy, like upbeat rock, but with more serious lyrics kind of thing. So it seems like, at least algorithmically, you have a very broad spectrum of things that you could tie into, which is great for the future. And also in that same vein, like, is there a direction? Do you think that you're going to take this? Do you want to do a different vibe each release, or are you going to really dive into what you set up on Silent Planet?
Yeah, I actually this might sound crazy, but I actually have a lot of stuff written for albums in the future, and my plan is to actually, like, each album is actually supposed to have a certain, not theme, but like a certain feel to it.
Yeah.
Because like, I guess when I write, I have these tendencies to write in certain ways that are very different from each other, but kind of related to. And I'm like, okay, I can't just throw this stuff in willy-nilly. I have to organize it somehow. So there's a lot of stuff I've written that, like, when I release the album, it'll sound like this. But then I'm like, I don't know if you know what shoegaze is, but I have a love for shoegaze, and I don't play guitar, but I kind of want to pick up the guitar and see if I can do some of that in the future. And then there's a lot of more, I don't even know what you'd call it, like more upbeat sort of piano based, but it's not like pop either. It's like, I don't know. But I want to compile that into one album eventually too. So I forget what your question was, but
no, that answers it. Like where you might take it in the future, and kind of diversify.
So in the meantime, it'll be the same vibe, yeah, for the next EP and the next album, yeah, nice. or the first album, I guess. Gotcha.
Yeah, and I think shoegaze it would be an interesting but also fun way to kind of get better at guitar because it's so textural and you can play with time and tones and stuff. It really is about just like the way that I and like some of my bandmates and friends and stuff will describe, like sometimes the best way, kind of like you were saying earlier about discovering the song and the music. A lot of times the best way to learn, whether it's engineering or a new instrument, is just keep trying stuff for fun until you hit on something that feels right. And yeah, I think all of us, when we learn to play guitar, whatever gear you do have, you just turn the knobs every which way and just be like, what does this sound like? What does this sound like? And then eventually you get more and more comfortable with the feeling of your hands. Like I can't play piano, but I've got a keyboard behind me here that I'm like, eventually I'll start getting more and more good at that. And every now and then I'll just break it out and plug it into some synths that are built into Logic and just be like, okay,
Yeah.
I can at least make a cool sound, even if it's technically just one chord.
And it makes it fun. Yeah, that's actually exactly why I have chosen not to learn guitar. Because I'm like, because I know a lot of what writing is learning the instrument too. So I'm like, if I actually want to like explore that, I need to not spoil myself yet. So I'm purposely not learning guitar until I want to actually dive into that. So I'm writing as I'm learning it. So to your point, basically, yeah, I think there's value in that.
Interesting. So what do you mean by spoil though? Like what would you be worried would go wrong?
Well, just more, I guess being intentional about, because you can, I feel like I think artists can get, I guess what my worry would be is I don't want to get, because I know if I started doing it, I would get excited about it. I'd want to spend all my time doing that. And right now I'm trying to be very intentional about, okay, this is not a writing season. This is a music business marketing season, playing shows, whatever. And I don't want to distract myself because I know I would because writing is like the true passion, right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, I need to be very disciplined about that. And I guess when I say spoil, I just mean like kind of playing and like writing stuff without maybe, I don't know, like sometimes you can play something and then it just be for your own enjoyment, but then you kind of forget about it and it disappears. And I'm like, no, I want to incubate it properly and really like capture it when it happens. And like I don't want to be sitting on, like a lot of this I've been sitting on for a while, and I hate that I've been sitting on it for so long. And I'd rather just get it done and spend time in the moment. Like I'm learning how to be in the moment with something. And also too, like if part of it is like I could learn guitar now and like write all this stuff, and then let's say it's 3 years from now, I might not enjoy playing it as much as I used to. And for live shows, you want the energy, right? You want the energy of like when you got excited about it. So it's more just like I'm trying to incubate and what's the word? I don't know, like just foster it properly, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think those incubate and foster, great words. It makes sense. Yeah, that explains it really well. Well, let's to wrap stuff up, I usually like to ask people to recommend. I'll make it like 3 and 3. So 3 artists or bands that you want to recommend to people that would help them connect with you, that are like major or influences, and then 3 that maybe aren't connected to you, but 3 artists or bands that you want to shout out that deserve more love.
I like this. Okay. So like the 3 that are connected to me, should they be like new or modern artists?
Really, whatever you think people should check out.
That are connected to me. Okay, well, obviously, old Coldplay, Rush of Blood to the Head, Parachutes, early Radiohead, probably like OK Computer, even though it's technically a little different, even like Kid A, that's more electronic, but it's still kind of a similar thing. And then I'm gonna shout out a subgenre. Like if you don't know what shoegaze is, check out shoegaze. It is a very I would say underappreciated, but also underdeveloped genre, because a lot of it is. I think a lot of that genre takes pride in having a crappy sound, like crappy production, and same with like dream pop and all that, whatever you call that genre. Like,
Yeah, like lo-fi stuff.
yeah, like there's a genre associated with shoegaze called, I think it's called dream pop, but it's the same thing. It's like it's really good, but it's almost like they take pride in terrible production, like really bad production.
Yeah, like some classic punk does that, which makes it hard to get into
Yeah,
sometimes.
and it's frustrating because like in my mind, you can capture the rawness of the instruments and of the performance, but still polish it. Like you can still polish it. You don't have to. It doesn't have to be, all done in a computer and perfect and quantized. You can still. It can still be raw. Um, and when artists do that, that's when I really appreciate it. But shoegaze, I would say check out shoegaze if you want a specific album. Um, I think it's called Sovlaki, so by Slow Dive is good. And then this one might be a little harder to get into, but it's kind of the people. It's like the crown jewel of shoegaze is Loveless by My Bloody Valentine. Um, I love that album, but it does have problems, production problems, in my opinion,
Okay.
with mixing levels. But it's really like if you can understand and just listen to it and like understand why it exists, then I don't know, it can, to me, it taps into a deep part of whatever you want, spirit or soul, whatever. Um, but I do think it can be perfected. So yeah, I would check out those two albums. And Radiohead, Coldplay, everyone knows who they are. Some artists that I want to shout out. Ooh, this is good. Hmm, this is good. I'll shout out a childhood favorite, who never really got proper love. His name is Pogo. He's an electronic artist. He's the guy that did all those like Disney movie remixes. I don't know if
Okay.
you ever saw those, but he is he has an incredible sense of melody. If you listen to it, it's fascinating because he basically creates songs sampling, typically if it's a musical, it'll be like the musical parts of the movie, but he'll sample like sounds from a movie and maybe parts of the soundtrack and make songs out of it. And but his ear, there's something about his ear that the feel of a lot of it is like it hits deep for me. But then he also has a really good sense of melody, despite not truly having like there's no real lyrics to it. It's literally he will literally make a melody out of like vocal bites that he takes from the movies, and he tunes them a little bit. So he's essentially taking syllables and gluing them together to make a melody. But you can kind of almost sing it. It's like you're singing like these fake words that he writes. But he's an incredibly talented, I guess, producer, artist, DJ,
Composer,
whatever
producer,
you want to. I
yeah.
don't know what you'd call it for an electronic artist, but he has been, since he started, just been hit with like copyright bullcrap his whole life, and
Yeah.
he's never gotten the proper appreciation for what he does, in my opinion. His YouTube videos never got taken down, and some of them have millions of views, but he's just never been able to profit off it. He could never monetize it. He could never sell it.
I wonder if he could make it work with like non-monetized YouTube or social media and then do like a Patreon or something, like some sort of loophole, because that sucks that
Yeah,
he's getting
I
like
I I
stonewalled.
don't know what he ended up. I mean, he still makes music, but his like big stride was kind of in 2013. Kind of when I was in early college, late high school. Um, and he still makes music. I don't know, but I think I think he kind of knows like he can't make money doing what he loved doing at the time, so he kind of writes his own stuff now. which is also good. But there's something different about like, I don't know, because his videos would also have he would also cut the video up so you can see where he got each part, and so you'd be watching this, you'd be watching like Winnie the Pooh, but like, oh, there's that sound and there's that whatever, and he just glues together, and then it's just cool. So check him out, support him if you can. I don't know if he has a Patreon or whatever, but he definitely deserves some love. Let's see some other artists that. Oh, I want to pick some good ones. I had someone in mind. Let's see. I want to pick someone good. I guess I'll throw out John Hopkins. I don't know if you know who he is. He's another electronic artist. I don't know. He's kind of more well known now after his last album, but he's probably this is a bold statement, but in terms of just like his his sonic depth and like his ability to, I don't know, create a song that, I don't know. I to me, I think of him as, under what context I can't really explain, but like I think he's like the best electronic artist that exists. But not because like his stuff isn't catchy and it's not like, you're not gonna dance, not necessarily dance to it. It's definitely kind of progressive house sounding. But it's more, what makes him so good is he has such control over his sounds, and he has a really incredible intuition into sonic depth. And if you ever listen to him, something that you might notice but not understand why is because it's kind of housey. It's like this pulse, right? But it never feels repetitive. But it is repetitive. But it never feels like monotonous. It's never.
It's always moving forward.
It's not. But I'll explain. It's like when you listen to it, you're never sick of it. Your mind is never like okay, I'm kind of numb to this. It never feels that way, and it's because, and when you like really listen, if you have a trained ear, you can kind of really listen and be like, okay, he is very subtly moving some things in and out. He's moving some things over here and here. He's adjusting reverb here and here constantly for every instrument. It's almost like every instrument's like moving a little bit one way or the other. So your brain is not, it never, because your brain, like all your senses, your nose, your ears, whatever, they pick up on subtle changes to things, whether you're conscious of it or not. And if it's repetitive enough, like with a smell or a sound, it'll start to tune it out. But if it can pick up on a very subtle change, a very subtle difference, it'll always be engaged with it. And so you're kind of like always engaged with the song, even though it, from a very superficial, higher level, it feels like it's the same thing over and over. And so he's just incredibly talented in that way. And also he just has great control over his instruments. Like they're clean, everything's clean, nothing is rubbing against anything else. He's a really good ear. He's very talented. But he's not for everyone. It's definitely an acquired taste for sure. I just have to shout him out because I think he's so talented.
Yeah, I'm excited to check that out.
Yeah, I hope you like it. It's definitely not for everyone, but he's just very, very good. Man, I'm trying to think. I think there was a band that I recently heard that I felt needed some recognition. I'm trying to think who it was. Let's see. I don't know. They're not coming to mind. I guess I'll just pick another random band or artist. Let's see. Who should I shout out?
Let's make it like this for the finale. The last reference or recommendation. I'm losing my words here. What's the last song, album, music video, whatever you heard or saw, even if it's something you just hadn't watched in a while, where you're like, man, why don't more people get into this? Similar to what you're saying about the last two, but like, was there a moment in the last week or month or something where you're like, oh, because I have a lot of those where I'm like, it's like upsetting that they're not more popular already, you know?
I mean, recently I've honestly kind of been really getting like listening to like like 30s and 40s jazz. So like
Interesting.
that's kind of what I've been like really interested in lately. I don't really like know a lot of the artists though. Ooh, maybe I'll shout them out. So I recently um this is another one that might be an acquired taste, but um I recently talked to a guy that I just met him, and we were talking about music, and we were kind of into the same stuff. And we started talking about ambient music, um, and he recommended a band called Hammock, which I had listened to before, but I guess whatever I had listened to at the time wasn't hitting for me. It didn't feel like there's depth to it, and so he recommended a certain album, and I actually don't remember the name of it, but and I listened to it, I was like, this is incredible. Like I wish I knew that this existed before. So maybe check out Hammock. They're also really good. Honestly, just ambient music in general. If you want ambient music, Brian Eno, Jonesy and Alex, and Hammock. Check those people out. I would
Okay.
say.
Sick. Yeah, that I mean, for me even personally, those I mean, I know who Brian Eno is, but I haven't really dove into that side of music, so I'm excited to learn a little more, and I hope people will branch out into something new. And I super appreciate you coming here and meeting up with me and talking about all this. I've genuinely really loved your explanations of everything. It connects with me very deeply on how you think about these things. So everyone, the band is Expedition Oliver. First EP is Silent Planet. Where can they find you social media wise, or for news, tickets, anything like that?
I know this is so cliche for an indie artist, but support me on Bandcamp if you want to support me. Check me out on Bandcamp.
Oh yeah.
Follow me there or whatever. Uh, if and when I get a decent following there, that's where I'll post a lot of updates. But for now, since I'm so local and like a lot of it is like friends that I asked to come see me, I do use Instagram. So if you want updates, probably Instagram. Uh, I but Bandcamp is where I try to get people to go to. Whether you just want to follow me there or if you want to support me, yeah, just Expedition Oliver at Bandcamp. What I forget how the site's. I think it's like slash. I don't know what it is, but
Yeah, but if you go to Bandcamp and search Expedition Oliver, you'll see this cover art come up in the search, and then definitely follow Andy there, and he's right. Bandcamp will do the most towards supporting the project directly.
If you want to support artists in general, you want to buy their stuff.
Yeah.
So, and Bandcamp takes the smallest cut when it comes to that. So that's why a lot of indie artists try to push people to get there. So
totally. And sometimes on certain Fridays they won't take a cut at all.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
definitely follow any artists that you already love or new artists on Bandcamp, especially Expedition Oliver. So thank you so much, Andy.